Hey, aloha guys, Eric West here, HawaiiRealEstate.org. What you're looking at here obviously is the Hawaiian island chain. I want to shoot this video real quick to show you some things that you can only see from Google Earth that'll hopefully make a lot more sense in terms of what's going on here with the fires in Lahaina. And also to hopefully encourage you to come visit, because you'll see it's a very small portion of the island that's obviously affected. So here's the entire island of Maui. Over here we have Molokai, Lanai, Ko'olawe, and the fire is right over here in Lahaina. So we've got the rest of the island obviously open for business, all of Wailea, Kihei. When you come to Maui, you land in Kahului. Right here is the airport. You can see the landing strip right there. And then when you come to the west side, you drive in an area we call the Pali. So you basically go around, these are the West Maui Mountains right here, and then you drive over here, what we call the Pali, which is the Sea Cliff Highway next to McGregor Point Lighthouse. And then you come up here, Papalau, Oluwalu, and you find yourself at Laniapoko. And you can see this is the first area of burn at the most southern point of the Lahaina fire. But let me take you over here real quick so you can see exactly where the fire started and some areas that don't quite make sense in terms of how they spread to where they spread to. So this is the area where the fire reportedly started, the brush fire that happened the morning of, somewhere one of these fields right here. This is the neighborhood here known as Lahaina Luna. Right here is the bypass, which is a new 4-lane highway that was recently opened to bypass the town of Lahaina. So right here is the neighborhood known as Lahaina Luna. The fire, according to friends of mine, crossed into the housing area right here in this part of the neighborhood, right next to the brush fire. And then from there, it spread to the north, this direction. Now the prevailing wind that day was flowing from the mountains towards the ocean. So towards the ocean was the predominant wind, anywhere from 35 to, they say, gusts of 80 miles an hour. My opinion, it was more in the 30s and 40s that day, but anyway, it was definitely predominantly flowing towards the ocean. So it's interesting, if you look at the fire, now remember it started over here in this field, and then these homes started to catch fire here, and then it spread this direction to the north. Even though the wind was, going towards the east, it was able to spread to the north, and then it even moved uphill, and this is the highest point of the fire that burned right here. Matter of fact, this is Tyler's home right next door. So this is the highest point of the fire. At this point, I'd like to interject really quickly. The highest structure fire, as I mentioned, was right here next to Tyler's home. That's the highest structure fire. Yet, we do have the burned out cars that I showed, which are above the bypass in this field. Those are the two burned out cars, and this field burned out, but none of the homes around it suffered any kind of fire. And the highest point of the fire itself is actually right here, next to Lahaina Luna, Go Lunas, next to the football field, right by this power station. However, the second reported flare-up of the fire is all the way down here, next to these homes. So it's interesting how this is the highest point of the fire. However, the second flare-up, and eyewitness reports say that the second flare-up occurred here and entered into the Lahaina structures towards the ocean, not up here at the hillside. And how do these fires start in this little field, and there's not enough fuel to melt 2 cars? Additionally, the fire spreads to the south. Even though the predominant wind again is heading towards the ocean, the fire goes significantly to the south, and the car that I showed where I was detained is right here. This is the neighborhood known as Laniapoko and the Hokiokio Street. It's a gated neighborhood right there. There's the gate. And then the car that was burnt out is right here. And again, there's no grass that caught fire directly across from that car, even though the wind is prevailing that direction. And you can see how far south the fire was able to travel. And there's even some interesting pockets that you can see that catch fire and yet skip entire fields, skip brand new homes that were built recently. So there's a lot of different individual fires, it appears, that burned, like this one right here. You can see is completely independent of the one that's across the street. But you have to ask yourself, how does the fire that flares up here travel uphill and then also into homes that do not catch fire, yet you have cars that completely burned out? The fire is able to continue to move to the north and then somehow crosses, this is a massive spillway area, somehow crosses this, again, to the north, even though the prevailing wind is heading towards the ocean, somehow crosses this massive ravine, concrete spillway, and then catches this field on fire. Now the part that I find really interesting is the fire continues to spread to the north, and then the only way it can get over here, this is the Waihekuli neighborhood, the only way it can get to that neighborhood is it literally has to go uphill. It's got to go the opposite direction of the wind, and it has to cross the bypass right here. At one of the thickest parts of the bypass, it's got to make this jump right here. It's got to go against the direction of the wind, and then you would think if it was able to make this jump, it would continue to burn, to the north, but then it again switches directions, heads towards the ocean, but then is able to bypass all of this new construction. So you can see here, this is all exposed 2x4s. It's about what it looked like the day of the fire, but doesn't touch that construction area whatsoever, goes around it, and then proceeds into this Waihekuli neighborhood. And then this little section of Front Street, right, the north section of Front Street, this is Front Street right here, this section also catches fire, and it didn't come from the south, right, because this is the furthest south that made it was the Jodo Mission right here. You can see there's nothing that burned north of the Jodo Mission except this little section in the center of Kahoma Village. So it didn't travel north from there, so the only way this little section of town, this north section of Front Street, across from Waihekuli, is if the fire jumps across this highway here, which is obviously the Honopi'ilani Highway. Interesting. Normally that would be a very strong fire break. And later on we'll talk about, this is the end of Front Street, this is where some of the traffic was being diverted that day in an interesting way, and I'll make a video showing that. But I thought it would be helpful for you guys to kind of see the questionable part of the fire to me is, number one, how does it go from this point of entry into the neighborhood? And again, remember, the wind is blowing towards the ocean, very strong, 35, 40, up to 80 mile an hour gusts, it's blowing that way. Yet somehow the fire is able to travel to the north and then back up the hill towards these homes to hit a highest point of impact right here, and then continues to travel to the north. Then it also jumps this massive spillway, concrete spillway, which I'm going to say is, I don't know, 20, 30 yards across. Not to mention, it catches this apartment building on fire, and it had to have crossed this concrete embankment. Also, the mystery of Emerald Plaza, you can see these buildings, only these 3 buildings burned in Emerald Plaza, everything else is okay around it. again, can the fire cross this massive spillway and just only catch these three metal buildings on fire? But also, somehow, to catch this neighborhood on fire here, known as Waikuli, it has to cross the bypass and go against the predominant direction of the wind. But it has to cross this massive bypass. This is the closest it gets burned right here. Somehow crosses this bypass and then travels to the north, goes around this construction zone. This doesn't catch fire, even though the predominant wind is blowing that direction towards the ocean, and snakes around this construction site. Then I was told by, this is where Danny is at, by the way, was told this was the first car to catch fire, and I've got video of it, crossing into the Waikuli neighborhood. Then this neighborhood burns. Again, predominant wind is blowing towards the ocean, but continues to travel all the way this way, up until the fire. This is, by the way, this is the fire department right here. This is the main fire department, and this is also the police department. But you can see how close the fire got to their buildings. But the fire is traveling north, but is able to also catch this neighborhood on fire, which is right across from Front Street. This is Front Street right here. This is the chart house right here. The only way the fire could get to this part is if it went across the highway. And is there evidence that it actually jumped this highway? Because you would think that would be a very significant fire break. And this is obviously where the highest concentration of police and fire department personnel. In the comments, let me know your thoughts. And also keep in mind, as you look at the entire island of Maui, this is the area that's affected, obviously, right in here. And then you've got all of Ka'anapali, Napili, Honokawai, Kahana, Kapalua, all of that open for business. And then, of course, you've got the rest of the island, all the way down here to Wailea, Kihei, all these beautiful beaches, all open for business. And, of course, everywhere else on Maui is totally unaffected. So it's not the entire island that's burned, it's just this one section of Lahaina town. So please come and visit and hit me in the comments with any thoughts that you have on the direction and how this fire could have possibly burned where it burned. Much aloha. Hey, be sure to buy the book. I'll put a link in the description, Burn Back Better. Please share the video, subscribe to the channel, and appreciate your support. With much aloha, Eric West out. Hey, aloha guys, Eric West here, HawaiiRealEstate.org. Thank you so much for watching the video. I ask you to do 3 things to help the people of Lahaina. 3 very simple things that you can do that can make a huge difference. Number 1, please like and share the video and subscribe to the channel. It's important that we spread the message. We're being shadow banned and the mainstream media has long since forgotten about this story. Number 2, please write, email, call, text your congresswoman or congressman and ask them for a full investigation into the Maui Lahaina fire and for financial support, for debt relief and for ongoing living expenses for those that are affected. The $700 ain't cutting it. And number 3, please give. I'll put a link in the description for people that were affected by this fire that you can give directly to those individuals, even if it's just $5. 100% audience participation would make a huge difference. And finally, encourage you to submit Freedom of Information Act requests to government agencies involved in this tragic event. Things like communications between the police officers and dispatch, between the fire chief and the water department, body cam footage. The more citizens that request Freedom of Information Act information, the more they can no longer deny giving us the information that is rightfully ours. So please do that. It's very simple, and thank you for your support.